Welcome to part 1 of a 3-part review series of the Parnis Explorer. Today in the initial impressions I'm going to be opening up the green package and having a look at the watch for the first time with all of you. I've only owned it for 2 hours, so this is going to be quite a raw feedback video. I don't plan on going in depth with the details of the watch. I'm going to keep it very brief and to the point. In part 2, the design review, I'm going to start breaking down some of the details about it and looking at it from a designer's perspective, comparing this watch to its Rolex counterpart. And in part 3, the closing thoughts section, I'll be going through how the watch has been wearing and really come up with some closing ideas of what I think about it overall. So with all of that being said, let's get into the video. First impressions are really good. The finishing, the little details like the sapphire crystal placement, the bezel placement, everything is accurate to what I expected, and once again Parnis delivers on the quality side of things when it comes to the way they build these models. So the Explorer, it's a timeless design. It's something that many people say is quintessential to the Rolex brand. The 369 format with the little triangle is so popular, and if you know anything about the history of the Explorer, you know that it has a long-standing history and is considered a very important model in the Rolex lineage. Having a look at it in closer detail, you may notice that the case is highly polished as well as the center links. Now this is a Generation 2 Explorer. The first generation Explorer came on a fully brushed case and brushed bracelet, as Explorers should. But I think that Parnis has taken the manufacturing back a little bit and decided to fit the Explorer dial to a date-just style case, which is understandable. Let's get through some of the dimensions and then we can talk more about the watch details. So the edge to edge of the case is 39 millimeters. Case height is 12 millimeters from the top of the glass to the underside of the case. But as you can see, there is a bulbous bubble back screw down case back, so the watch sits at about 14 millimeters tall. On the wrist it would sit a lot more comfortably because it does flatten down. Underneath it has a solid case back, which is very nice. It's actually the best case back I've seen on a Parnis model, which is great. It has a single deploying clasp that doesn't have a safety lock. This is once again your entry level oyster style bracelet clasp, so we'll look into that just now. Like I've said, the crystal is a sapphire crystal. It has a matte dial. If I bring this up and try and get it past the stand, it has a matte dial that is very nicely placed, and all the numerals are very well printed and placed onto the dial. Everything's well set. You can see the inset minute track. It looks very nice. And I was wondering if I would appreciate the polished 3, 6 and 9, and I think that adds to the equation of this model especially. It just makes it a little bit more interesting when you're wearing it, so I can understand why Rolex decided to do this with their previous generation models. The first word that came to mind when I unpackaged this was legibility. Seeing the numeral placement, seeing the hands, seeing how everything is spaced on the dial really is legible and easy to read when it comes to telling the time. So for something that is a wristwatch, I think it's very important, so they definitely hit that on the head. And I can see why so many people appreciate the Explorer aesthetic because of that reason. Inspecting the crown, this is one of the biggest features of the watch that I like the most, is the way the crown functions and the way it sits in comparison to the case. So unwinding it, you see it jumps out of the case and it has a very nicely threaded barrel that it sits on. Much more heavy duty than the GMT Parnis, which I'm quite impressed with. So manually winding, it's very smooth, which is great. First position is a blank position. Obviously this watch doesn't have a date, but this movement is set to have a date complication. So since it doesn't have a date, this doesn't do anything. Pulling it out to the second position hacks the movement and allows you to set the time. So let me just flick it forward. And I'm really impressed with it because overall functionality, the feel of the hand setting is a lot more comfortable compared to the GMT. So that was good. This is a very good improvement of the watch overall. The fact that you can set the time so easily is a big plus in this watch's direction. Now screwing the crown back in, this is what I say to everyone when it comes to screwing down crowns. What you do is you push it towards the case, turn it away from the thread and then onto the thread. What that does is it allows the thread to catch and doesn't give you an opportunity to strip the thread itself, which is very important. Let's talk about the bracelet and the clasp next. If you've seen my Parnis GMT review of the Batman, it's a 3-part series where I talk about the same sort of thing. I mentioned that the end links are a problem with the watch, and I find that the end links jut out too much from the case. And this watch does suffer a similar fate. If you are getting this model or any solid end link Parnis model, you'll be getting a model of watch that has an end link that sticks out beyond the case, and it's to do with manufacturing. I'll get into more detail when we get into the design review, but that's all I can say. It does impact the way the watch sits on the wrist because of the way these end links are situated. The finishing is very good. I've looked at the sides and I've noticed that it's polished and not sharp. The burrs have been rounded off, so you can't cut yourself on the edges of the bracelet, which is excellent. Center links, you can say what you like about it. I don't personally like the polished center links very much. It doesn't really suit the watch, but that's okay. And going on to the clasp, like I said earlier, it doesn't have a safety mechanism. It is just your standard oyster style clasp, so you'd fit a nail underneath and pull. And overall the finishing is very good. You can see how it's been screwed down onto it. You can see the milling is very accurate. It does come with a 5mm extension like you would expect on one of these styles of clasps. I'm currently using it because it's a bit more comfortable to wear that way. And what I've noticed is that the threading, when it comes to the fitment of this clasp, it's very tight underneath. So being able to fold it back on itself is quite difficult, and I think that'll just take a little bit of wear and tear to get it to fit and to loosen up a bit. What I've noticed is that the material is very fine on the clasp itself. The metal is very thin, which is a bit of a problem. Compared to the GMT, for example, this is sitting quite sharp in comparison to the other models, so that's something to consider. But now I'll throw it on the wrist and let's have a look at it. So on my 7-inch wrist, the watch sits extremely comfortably. Overall, the presence is great. I think that's one of the biggest advantages to having a 39mm case, is that the presence is there, the legibility is there in spades. And really, all things aside, the end links don't play such a big role in being too obtuse when it comes to wearing the watch. They don't seem to get in the way very much. In comparison to the GMT that I wore, this is a lot more subtle and dressed down. You notice the case height is reduced, like I said, because of the way, depending on your wrist, of course. Because I have a flat wrist, it allows the case to sit a little bit more comfortably into the wrist. But overall, first impressions, this watch really does shine. As an everyday wearing watch, I don't think you can get any better, for the price point especially. Let's get it off the wrist and conclude the video. So far in the last few hours, initial impressions have been very good. Only time will tell. In the second part of the series, the design review, I'll talk more about the details that I haven't covered in this video. I'll talk about the timekeeping, the watch's wearability, and just how it's been treated over the last few days. But until then, to all my new subscribers, thank you for watching and for joining, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers for now.